Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. My name is Dave Leese, and today I'm thrilled to welcome 1992 Olympic silver medalist, 1993 world professional figure skating champion, Paul Wylie. Welcome to the show.
How's it going?
I'm
This
doing
is
well.
great.
How are you?
Good,
So
good.
you've been around the country lately. People have been talking about doing lessons with you.
Yes.
It's popped up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I have been in Lake Placid over the last 3.5 years, being the director of sport here, and the state decided they wanted to go into a different direction, and they're actually going through the process of changing over leadership and those kinds of things. So, in the meantime, I'm teaching professionally, and so anybody who'd like to reach me, that would be, go Wylie@me.com.
Okay,
Is that
absolutely.
wrong to say?
No,
Yeah.
I think
You
people are going to
know,
hit you up on it. So be
well,
ready.
good.
Yes.
At any rate, I love teaching skating, and I love trying to pass those things on that I've learned. And I had a lot of wonderful teachers in the past, including the man, right behind your head, which is John Curry. And so I was able to work with John when I was 10 years old for 2 weeks. And that really sort of changed my entire career. So I guess that's my swing thought when I go out and teach skating now, is I try my best to do for the kids and the adults that I teach and anybody else what John did for me, which was create a new paradigm and a new set of expectations. And, actually the free leg can be straightened and the toe pointed and the hip lifted all at the same time, but it takes a lot of work and dedication and muscle memory. And so anyway, I like to teach those kinds of things. I also like to teach people, what I know about jumping and what I learned from Evie and Mary Scotvold and Carlo and Chris Fassi, and what I know about, line from Mr. Nix. So John Nix, because I skated pairs. And so I've had a little bit of a varied career and enjoy that. So it's a chance to get out in public, which is nice after COVID, And so I was in LA for a couple of weeks and got to witness the Irvine unbelievable, setup. Also a great program in Lakewood. And then also 5 rinks in the Boston area, which was amazing. So lots of exciting stuff going on out there. Lots to be, hopeful for, I think, in the future of skating. Some cool events that are coming up that I'd love to chat about as well. And just glad we can sit down and talk about sit spins.
Yes. Well,
Right.
I'll get to that. The
Yes.
other night I got a text message from Dorothy Hamill and she
Mhm.
said, "Can I call you about your sit spin?" And then I said, "Well, I'm actually interviewing Paul Wylie on Friday. Do you have thoughts about Paul?" And she said, "Let me think about
Oh,
it tonight." And she called, and I have about like 10 pages of notes about everything that she
wow.
likes about your skating. So we'll go through it.
That
It's
is
very
so nice.
detailed. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, that is humbling when I think about Dorothy and the impact that she had on my life as a kid. I borrowed her scribe when I was 10 years old that very summer when I got to work with John Curry, because they were both training to become the Olympic champions in the rink where I was skating. So it was just amazing to watch. And she just had such an air about her on the ice and the crispness and beautiful double axel, but her figures were amazing, right? So really
She
fun to
says that
watch.
your figures were beautiful and that she was watching them as a kid. And she says he
Oh,
doesn't know how good he was. And she was paying attention,
wow.
she said, when you
Well,
were.
that's nice. That
Yeah.
is nice.
So, my first question, why did you fall in love with skating?
Um, Probably because of my sisters, I mean, it was a family thing for us, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I was 3.5 when I started skating. And I have to say that the first place I did skate was in Aspen, Colorado, which makes it very easy to fall in love with skating. And because at the time, the Brown Ice Palace was this indoor outdoor facility with canvas walls, and the sides would flap in the wind, and it was just a magical spot. And but we did it as a family. My dad was president of the Dallas Figure Skating Club, my parents ice danced, my sisters skated, and it wasn't serious. It was very
Wait, did your
much
parents
a
ice dance
fun thing.
before? Or were they like adult ice dancers, or is this like in the ice dance social
Adult
era?
ice dancers. No, my mom grew up pining to skate.
Okay.
So she would go Friday nights. She's from the Pittsburgh area. I think there was a place called the Duquesne Gardens that you could public skate. And she literally dreamed about being a skater. And, so the minute we, were able to have skates on, she wanted all of us to learn how to skate. And there was a great rink at the fairgrounds in Dallas. And so we went down there and, I don't know, we got involved. We got heavily involved.
How quick did you know that skating was your passion and that this was your thing? I mean, obviously your family, it seems like they were leading this. This sounds like Tiger Woods' father making him watch.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I loved it and I liked being in shows and those kinds of things. But at the time, there were no competitions at all. Right. And so I would say it was probably those summers when I was 10 and 11 when we were skating in Colorado, in Denver. And there were the skaters all around that were going to go to the Olympics, and it was just an incredible experience to just try to get better and better. I had no doubt I wasn't going to the Olympics. I just, I couldn't even think about it. It was too much. It was too big of a goal. But it was wonderful to be, involved in it. I was also kind of into music when I was a kid. And so this was a way to do everything, to be, and I love to interpret music. And so the music would come on and then I would go and skate around. And that was what I like to do. So at any rate, it was probably, 9, 10, 11, that age.
Who was your first teacher and like what kind of an impact did they have on you?
So the person I took my very first lesson from was Ron Barnett. And he is a British guy who was in Aspen, Colorado in the summer. But my first real coach was Joe Summerfield. And Joe was, Joe's famous for a lot of things. He made the ice rink in Hawaii. So if you've ever skated at the ice rink in Hawaii, like he made it.
Yeah.
And he also was a student of the Lucy technique and had come here to Lake Placid to work with Gus Lucy. And so he really, he was a Canadian guy but really worked with big arms. And so it was something that I grew up, trying to swing those big axles and things like that. And I think he focused a lot on our stroking and the edge quality of those kinds of things. And so I grew up with that. I mean, I think that he, my first competitive skating program was to dueling banjos. And so I had, there was a little sense of humor in that. And also it was like, my first movie soundtrack. so there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe was a great start for me that I took from a man named Dick Potticary, who was he was really intense and was intense on figures and in the technique in a different way. And then I moved to Colorado and started training with Carlo and Krista and Diane Miller and then I went to the Broadmoor with them and, I also worked with, Christy Crawl and some other folks who helped me out. So, but I mean, it's funny because I was a dabbler, I worked with, I would fly to Tacoma, Washington, and, get some, lessons from Kathy Casey. I would go, I worked with Ronna Gladstone some in New England. I, would, work with Barbara Rolls helped me land my first triple toe. So I was a little bit of one of these open source kind of guys, which makes total sense to me now. But, because I think of a lot of things today are very much a closed source, these teams and things which are like nobody in, nobody out kind of thing. And I'm not sure that's always the best way. It wouldn't have been the best way for me, but at any rate, I benefited from hearing from other voices, even Don Laws, So because I was in Denver, but training in Colorado Springs, I was going to school at the same time. So there were, people that I got a chance to work with, but my main coaches in my life, were Joe Summerfield, Dick Potticari, Carlo and Krista, and Evie and Mary Scotvold. And, it was really Evie and Mary Scotvold who rehabbed my skating and took it to the next level. And, Evie was able to, he was able to understand what I needed to get my jumps to become triples, which were repeatable, and a triple axel, which was repeatable. And he had the patience of Job to do that.
We're going to get into that. Jenny
warm-up.
differs when she describes Evie. It's more of a loving that he did not have the patience of Job. But
right. And that's the thing. I was just about to say, like, he had the patience of Job for some things, and for some things he really didn't, But let me tell you that in the warm-up for the short program at the Olympics, when I fell on both triple axel attempts, he was the one who came back and said, you remember how to do this, He wasn't yelling at me like, you idiot, like, this is the Olympics, don't forget what you know. And so anyway,
we listened to a podcast you did about Evie, and Jenny gave her live commentary on everything that she was thinking as you were describing the Olympics.
My gosh.
So
that's funny.
But I've always wanted to ask you, you talk about this early phase in your career. And one of the things I read early on, and maybe you could correct this, that you were flying back and forth between John Nicks and Colorado throughout the week to prepare. Can you break this down? And the fact that you have adult skater parents makes way more sense now that you're describing this whole situation. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, I wouldn't call it in midweek or anything, but we did. So we started pairs skating as, I don't want to call it a whim, you know what I mean? But so I skated pairs with Dana Graham, who's a well-known technical specialist.
Graham, the daughter of the head of U.S. figure skating.
That's is not correct.
Just a random partner, Paul. Like, this is this lineage here, right?
Right. And Dana and I grew up skating together, and I think Carlo was like, look, we should just try this out. And so literally, Carlo stands Dana on top of the boards and then puts me underneath her, trying to lift her. The first day, I'm like, I'm however old I am, 11 years old or something. There's no way I could lift her. Anyway, so we got a chance to come to Lake Placid actually for the training camp, and we learned all of our lifts. The axle lift, the Let's lift, and all those loop lift. And then we started to work with Jane Driano to put our programs together. That's Susan Driano's mom and Cynthia Driano's mom. Anyway, she was terrific and got us through our first season. And we won Southwesterns. We got a chance to go to mids. And it was like, great, haha, that was really cool. Then the next year, we had this opportunity to work with John Nicks in the summer. And so we went to California and worked with him, and he gave us a short program. It was amazing. We went into juniors, and I'm sorry, we were already in juniors because there was no novice pairs then. That was the thing. And we got better, and we went. We had a pretty quick career. It was only really 5 years, and but we started to train in California. Then the next year was the year that we went for nationals to try. I'm missing this. I'm sorry. We did a year in novice, and then we went to juniors. Sorry, Dana. You can edit that out. Anyway,
now, I have a question. How tall are your parents? Because they've made so much of your height over the years. You and Scott Hamilton have joked about it. Did they think you were going to grow into a big pair skater? Was this just fun? Well, okay.
No, they didn't. And so my dad is 5'4". My mom is 5'2". And so there was not going to be a lot of height in our family. So I think that they knew that. But at the time, Ty and Randy were world champions or were going to become world champions. And so there were more skaters that were, more of that sort of side-by-side quality. You didn't have the, very tall, very short skater like the Russians started to do. They actually started to do it in the early 80s. But at any rate, it seemed like the right thing to do. And we were able to do, all the required elements. I mean, the hardest one was the lasso lift, which we did in senior pairs after winning the juniors at nationals. And we got a chance to go internationally. And I think that maybe the first times we got it up were, you know, the week before we went to San Giovanni Over. That lift was so hard. It's like, you know, swing her around and stuff as a same sized, you know, height partner. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. There were, you know, what I loved about training and on the West Coast was there was just a completely different feel. It was much more about show business and polish. And so I enjoyed having that to play with a little bit mentally. And Mr. Nix, you know, was a taskmaster. I can remember every single element of the short program he would train, you know, the camel spins, and this sounds very basic, but we would go over it and over it and over it so that it was, you know, so that it was really good and together. And so there's no mystery as to why Mr. Nix's teams, you know, come out looking with the polish that they do. And we had some terrific people that we worked with out there with spins and choreography that helped us really, you know, even like look in the right direction and be together. So that's the part that I think was really great for my skating. And I think that also, you know, when you're training junior men's and junior pairs programs or novice men and junior pair programs, there's like, you know, you're getting a lot of work now. you're running through a lot of programs.
You had one of the coolest moves I've ever seen. And there's a video of it on YouTube, but it's not great. It's an encore that you did at a show. And the two of you did spirals next to each other and then went on opposite ends of the rink and came back. Can you kind of talk us through this element? Who developed it? Sure. What are the keys? Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so Jane Duriano really taught it to us. And so it's basically, you both start out on a forward outside spiral. And then in the middle, and with a lot of speed, obviously, and then in the middle of the rink, you separate. And she went on an inside spiral and came back around. And so you made an 8 and came back together again. And it's the kind of thing that I think to the visual, it's really satisfying visually. So the audience just really got excited when we came back together. And it was always a nice rest. But at any rate, very, very much a good show, a good thing for your show program.
Talk about the John Nix method. My friend who worked with him said that he made them do a certain amount of stroking before you could move on to start. Was that your experience with him?
Yeah, I mean, as a pair skater, you're always, you know, warming up with your stroking, and yeah, and I think that it's because speed is so important, but also the togetherness. When you get to the competition, you know, that's what the judges are really watching. And I think that he wanted his pairs to be, you know, in the same velocity category as the Russians. And so, you know, we definitely spent a lot of time on that. And it was about also like how you stroked, you know, what were your feet doing? I feel like I've spent a lot of time stroking in my days, you know, and trying to get speed out of my blades and not toe push. And so I do spend a lot of time on that with athletes today, because I feel like it's important to pass that back on.
Stretch here, that takes energy. This a triple axel.
Well, Dorothy Hamill likes your stroking, and she said one of her favorite things about your stroking is that each length of the crossover edge is the same length as the previous one on both outside and inside edge. So how did you develop that over time?
Well, John Curry, you know, and so I mean, I guess that's probably why Dorothy likes it. But you know, because literally I was a little kid that flicked his hands a lot from Texas. And you know, John worked with me for 2 weeks for an hour a day, and you know, on the outside push and then the under push and making them equal, and then the stretch and the point of the toe. And I just had no idea that skating was so technical that you had to focus on so many details. But it was, I think it's that sort of the fact that I was able to use my foot all the way through to the ball of the foot without toe pushing, and then finishing the under push. I'm talking about forward crossovers, obviously, and then reaching, for the backward ones, and then was able to put that into practice in pairs. That perhaps those are the things that helped me, get, the basis, that foundation of stroking and good crossovers and stuff. I think it's very important for an athlete, in skating, because you spend so much of your time getting speed for things, that if you don't look good doing that, or if you're inefficient doing that, it really does take its toll.
I had a coach tell me that my axle got better because my stroking got better. That
Yeah.
the ride into it. So
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think, because of the balance and the flow, the feeling of the rocker, I think one of the things that I see with a lot of people doing today is I don't see them, using the rocker of their blade on their axle. They're just, stepping down and trying to hit the toe pick. And they're really missing the, half the runway. And, I'm always trying to describe the blade and tell people, this is the ride. This is the amusement park right here, is all about the rocker and the edges and the way that you can play with those things. And we spend our lives trying to figure it out.
how satisfying is that ride into the triple axel when you do it from the rocker entry? And
Well, if you land it, it's super satisfying.
I imagine you worked on that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, I can remember, the drama of landing both the double axle and the triple axle, because and everybody can probably relate the same. I mean, those axles are huge hurdles. They're very important milestones in your life, and it took me an awful long time to learn both of them, actually.
Okay. So I want to come back a little bit when you mentioned John Curry.
Yeah.
How did you find out you were going to work with him, and what was your internal monologue at the time? How nervous and excited were you?
Oh my goodness. I think that somehow my mom had talked to Carlo about it. And, I think it was basically like John needed some spending money, and so here was an idea. And at the time that was not done, but so we were like, hey, here's a little cash, and but it was, for me, I was excited, because I thought, here's a guy who has a triple loop, and he's going to teach me how to jump, and in a week or whatever, I'll have all these things. And so all I wanted to do was jump. And what he wanted to work on was, he had just come from working with Gus Lucy. So he wanted to work on spins, and he wanted to work on stroking, and he wanted to work on spirals. And, my camel spin, just the kind of transformation of my camel spin was really worth every penny. But at the time, it was really hard, because I'm having to lift my free leg up here, and I only wants to be there. And I'm this pudgy little kid from Dallas, and I just didn't have that same level of expectation. And again, that's why I think was so valuable there, was that John really shattered my expectations of what was possible. And quite literally after that time, when we worked together, the summer of 1975, I never got lower scores in artistic impression than technical merit. So is that right? Yeah, I always got sort of a bump from the artistic impression mark. So
How did you go from working with John Curry to working with Robin Cousins? I know that he choreographed early programs for you. And
well, Robin, so they both skated at the rink where I skated, and Robin lived with us in our house. And so, he was, cutting the music, and, he wanted to do the programs. So he did my program for Junior Worlds in '81 when I won. And he did a piece of program that I did as a senior as well.
so when you were skating with all these high level skaters, were you training with Ty and Randy in
Yeah.
California? Were you studying them and watching what Randy and Ty did?
Absolutely. I mean, I was watching them, leading up to the weeks before the Lake Placid games, and I've never seen anyone train as hard as they were training, and the wind sprints and the off ice training. So it was devastating to see them get injured. But just even the ballet and the kinds of things that they were doing off ice, their lifting technique and the quality of their skating, that was something to watch. I mean, it was beautiful. Their skating was really something that inspired me as I was, moving forward in my career as well.
What did you like about their skating compared to Arena Rodina? I guess insights about that time.
Yeah, I mean, and I liked both of their skating, and I had video. We had reel to reel video for the '76 Olympics, so I watched it over and over again. To me, Ty and Randy, especially in the Munich Worlds when they won, they combined the power and the essence of together, unison skating, this and the beauty of line and musical interpretation. I mean, it really was like going to watch a wonderful ballet duo. And I think that Running and Zaitsev were just so powerful, and fast, and who knows whether they would have passed the drug test or not. I don't know, but at the end of the day, Ty and Randy were certainly, an inspiration to watch, because they were really going up against this icon, this, soon to be three-time Olympic gold medalist, and they were tackling it with the combination of what skating is about, which is, the athleticism, but also the artistry. And so that part I really appreciated. And I think that they're, if you haven't seen their program from winning the 1979 World Championship, you owe it to yourself, just beginning with that very dramatic Holst planets that was done by Tomita, and then going into the more balletic stuff, and the big finish, really exciting, and certainly of an era, when we would chop different things and edit and put in pieces of music that were not necessarily from the same genre or era or whatever, but there was a drama to it that was really fabulous.
Where were you during the 1980 Olympics?
Denver. So
Okay.
we lived in Denver. Yep. And we saw everything an hour late. So
You'd
everyone
watched
was
all
like,
of these people training. You were at the rink with
yeah,
Robin Cousins. Who
yeah.
was at your rink at this time, Paul? This is
Right. Yeah. I mean, so they all were, Robin and Emmy Watanabe, we'd watch Ty and Randy. I mean, it was, and I think that everyone had come through Denver or through Santa Monica at some level. So I felt like I really did know everybody that was competing. It was emotional, and it was like, wow, I can't imagine being there in the midst of all of the nerves and the pressure, and then little did I know, 8 years later, there I'd be.
So there's so many stories from 80, Frank Carroll and Linda, felt that Carlo had a hand in Linda not winning the gold. Krista would say that Carlo didn't have political influence. He was just friends with people because they spoke the same language. What's your take on that, and who deserved to win the women's title?
I don't think that one person can, put their foot on the scale more than anybody else. I do think that Carlo was a master of discussing things and talking about why one person over another, but I don't think that he was, and I think that he was a reasoner, and so he could pitch an idea. And I think that, for him, his student that he was concerned with would have been Robin. And so he was wanting to make sure that people were thinking about the artistry of skating and not just the technical piece, and so I'm sure that he was pitching that pretty hard. And then I think they were probably saying, well, what about, how do we give something to, so I don't really know how that works out or how it worked out then. But I do think that as the Olympics evolve, sort of through the 2.5 weeks, I think that things happen that wind up, giving opportunity for skaters. I do think that Linda skated well, and I thought that Nancy Kerrigan skated well, well enough to win the gold. And so I don't know why they didn't win, but I think that, there was at the time sort of a geopolitical, maybe there were conversations that were had behind the walls, but I don't think it was Carlo that was the only broker. You know what I mean? So I think that Carlo was a very good spokesperson for his athletes, and he also was able to kind of frame things in a way that I think he understood what was better for the sport, and he would definitely pitch it in a way that might benefit his student. So,
well, speaking of benefiting the sport, there are so many people that talk about the greatest of all time, and they throw these terms around. But thinking about that structure of figure, short program, free program, in your mind, is the best skater of all time, does that include figures, or how do you conceptualize that?
Boy, I find it very difficult to, call someone the greatest of all time. But I'd have to say that for me in the men's category, and I know that people in Japan will say, well, if you say anybody but Yuzuru, you don't know what you're talking about. But I would say Dick Button, for me is the greatest of all time, because this is, because he was the only person that's won both the North American and the European championship. He won straight world championships. He never flubbed once he was a world champion. He won 2 Olympic gold medals. He did it during the era of school figures. He did it during the era of getting on a boat to go to your competition. And he broke barriers with revolutions, of jumps, between the triple loop, the double axel, and the flying camel. He brought things to the table that were, brand new ideas. And so for those reasons, I feel like he's the undisputed in terms of the men's side of the sport. In the women's side of the sport, I think the greatest of all time is difficult, because it then comes down to such a play of how did the how do you balance the artistic and the athletic, and anyway, I was just thinking the other day that sometimes I think we obsess over the results so much that we forget that at least 50% of our sport is artistic, and that's opinionated. So I think that's hard, But so I think that it's good to have favorites, and I think that it's the people that you continue to go back to and draw inspiration from and watch over and over again. I don't think I've ever wasted a minute of time watching Bolero, for instance, by Torval and Dean. Okay, I mean that was a life-changing event. I did watch them train that in Oberstdorf for the weeks leading up to the Olympics in Sarajevo, and I feel very fortunate to have seen the level of detail between that and the Capriccio and the other things that they were working on, their compulsory dances. So anyway, I guess I covered the greatest of all time there.
How about spins? Would you consider Ronnie Robertson to be the greatest?
Yes, I would, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just by virtue of the sheer speed and the innovation, the ability to do whatever he could. And the poor man, I think that it wound up, giving him some, I don't know, like, I think maybe we're all going to worry about what we get from spinning around so much, but he was really such an extremely gifted spinner that I think that it wound up, giving him some issues. That is not there's not like a medical opinion there. But
yeah, I think I read about that with Lucinda Rue discussing that as well.
Yeah.
How about 1980-81 season? You won the Junior Worlds. Now it was in December or something. At the other time, I know that the years are off at how this is. Yes.
Right. So it was the 81 Junior Worlds, but in December of 80, and then you had to go and as you're the Junior World Champion, they sort of expect you to win nationals. And I did not have my best nationals, but I won anyway, which is good. That was that was when Junior Worlds was 16 and under. And so the move from juniors to seniors was really, it was done at a time when you're, just finally getting it in terms of, I was finally getting like a triple Lutz, and, I had just gotten triples, triple sow, triple toe. And then I got, flip and Lutz. And so then I had all of these new jumps, moved into seniors, and with the senior figures, I mean, I was at the bottom of the barrel that next year. So, but I was I enjoyed my Junior Worlds experience. Actually, Larissa Selesna and Oleg Makarov are here in Lake Placid this week, and we've been reminiscing about London, Ontario, and our Junior Worlds that were there. And it was a neat and very interesting class of folks that were there, in terms of our era, so Midori Ito was sort of an unheard of person, and she was there, Lloyd Eisler, the kind of the people that there were people that really did have Tiffany Chin was the women's champion there. I'm not thinking straight at this point, but it was a fun time. I enjoyed that time a lot.
I wanted to ask you about the skater Jill Sawyer, because Carlo said
Yeah.
in a book that she would
Amazing.
have been two-time Olympic champion. I saw Brian Boitano posted her Lutz recently. How good was she?
Really good. Really
Okay.
good. Just, she took from Kathy Casey, so she had this real great fundamental athleticism. And I think, very, huge jumps. It should have absolutely had a triple axel. And, I don't know about a two-time Olympic champion, because
You know how to sell, as you said, he knows how to
Yes.
promote and make a good argument.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I think that because I think you could make the same argument for Tiffany Chin, and she came here to the Skate America with the triple axel, and no one in women's event had even thought about a triple axel, and so I think that there were those athletes that just, kind of took this moment and they shot straight to the top, and very fun to watch that. I mean, Rosalind Sumner's was the same way, boom, she was all of a sudden, a world champion. So it is, it's amazing to see.
Did you get to practice with Roz? Because she is our favorite guest that we've ever had on the show. And
practice with her. We were on Stars on Ice. In fact, so I'm sitting at my desk. I'm sitting at my desk, and she gave me this gift right here. It's like a little we had a dance at nationals in Portland in 1978, and oh yeah, she's the special. I really love Roz. She's awesome.
I have a question. Kathy Casey and Christy Kroll, today they're thought of as big technicians, but in some of the research I've done, they were both considered masters of figures. Is that true at the time? They were specialists?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that so, and both of them had a way of describing and dismantling the figure into its elements, and being able to sort of coach without emotion this thing that was so difficult for some of us. So I worked with both of them, and they were both fabulous. And so Kathy would have like these sheets of paper, and then she would go out and she would mark your figure and tell you what you needed to do, not like a judge as much as, just evaluating the different, moments in your figure. And Christy, had all these wonderful analogies, and was able to really think about, for me, like she helped me get around my paragraph figures, with the flow, just getting the first half of the circle being a glide, the second half being a pull, yeah, both of them were great. So I loved working with both of them.
What was the genius of Carlo with figures? Because in talking to Mark Militano, he was saying that he felt Carlo was good at taking what you had and improving it. He argued that Howard Nicholson taught it from scratch better. Do you have an opinion on Carlo's figures genius that is so vaunted over time?
Well, I grew up, I went from, I was an intermediate when I moved. So I was on my third test, when I moved and started to take from Carlo. And so I could remember skating around, and Carlo would follow you around the figure and kind of hold your hand and put your arms into the position and get you ready for the turn. And, he would talk about your brackets, go zack, zack. And so that there was all of these words that would be sort of a timing word, and then he would always say standing, which would, like lean your body into the circle so that you can trace your to the inside. And so there were all of these things that, came through what he said. And but yeah, I think that he was able to say, like, here's a guy who has a natural loop, that does it this way. And so we're going to go with that, I don't know. I never took from Howard Nicholson. But, Carlo, Carlo got me to a certain level with my figures. And then like I said, I went to Evie and Mary later on, and I was able to then become more consistent, with both my figures and my free skating. And I don't know, maybe it's maturity, but I think Evie also was an incredible figure coach, and Mary, and both of them could, they had different strengths, Evie was really into deep three turns and brackets and things like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I have the benefit of working with a lot of talented people, and, and I think that I wasn't the most talented skater. I worked hard, and I was not great at figures. It's not great at
You were a
figures.
sponge though, mentally studying this stuff, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, but I would say that I would get into the competition and it would all go away because I was so dang nervous, And
Okay, let's talk about that, because in the
yeah.
David Santee podcast, and a couple of episodes, he references Evie playing games with you intentionally when you were with Carlo, and I think he was coaching Jimmy Santee, and he would have him do a Lutz when you were struggling with your Lutz. Did you know this was going on? Yeah.
I don't know. I think Evie liked to have fun like that, and he was a coach, he was like a great basketball coach, or, whatever. I mean, so I think that he would exploit strengths, and if I was, yeah, I mean, I think that, at the time that I was competing with Jimmy, he was doing a double flip, triple loop in the short program, because double flip was the combination. And I was doing a double flip, triple toe, which was really hard for me. But then I'm like, great. So I have this move and I'm going to hit it. And now somebody's going to do a double flip, triple loop. Oh my gosh. Anyway, and Jimmy had great figures, but, it came down to the long program, at the one time that we really faced off, which was at a Midwesterns. And so anyway, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think Evie liked to have fun with things like that, for sure. I wasn't a big fan.
Do you have thoughts of Evie in the ice shows, being a clown, and he was on TV shows and all of this stuff? When we researched him, his skating background was quite surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I think that Evie, he competed as a young boy, but then didn't compete after that as much. And I think that his background was in entertaining people and being in entertainment. And so I think that he had a real sensitivity for that. And Mary, obviously, was, had such an artistic bent. So I think they were a great combination, the two of them together, because they were able to, because I mean, he was, in terms of jump technique and being, a stickler to those details. I think that he was able to really, bring the height of my jumps up where they needed to go. But then also understood what was necessary in order to perform. And that unlocked something that, was really important to me too. And so I think it gave a purpose behind the performance that was really important, especially as I grew older.
So how important are the other skaters in the rink? Because one thing I noticed is, if you all grew up with Robin Cousins, you and Tom Dixon both have the most incredible skating skills and extension. Did you kind of learn from each other, or is this just, you know, a byproduct of
Well,
everyone
I don't think that Tom skated very much with Robin, but I don't know. Like, I mean, because he was at the Broadmoor, but I think that, yeah, I mean, so that rink, the Colorado Ice Arena between 1976 and 1980, 81, everybody was there. I mean, so, you know, you would have the Italian champion, the French champion, the Japanese and the Korean, and you'd have, you know, Scott Hamilton and Scott Kramer, and you'd have, you know, obviously Robin or John Curry, or, I mean, just, it was Ron Shaver, all of these people were skating there. And so that quality level brought the entire rink up. But I think it was definitely for me, the John Curry, you know, that those lessons at 10 years old that made such a huge difference. And then to watch people finishing everything and doing, you know, the extension on, you know, literally a waltz jump and making it important instead of sloughing it off and walking around like nothing matters. You know, I think that happens today, unfortunately. So anyway, so when I go into someplace, I'm always like, hey guys, let's take every detail, you know, let's pretend like every single moment you're on the ice, people are watching you. And what happens is that once you know, you're used to doing that, it becomes a habit, and then your foot just turns out and you point your toe, and you know, when you extend your free leg, that's where it goes. And I think that is probably what you're after as a coach, is to get that repetition, just be, you know, fire automatically.
Well, when did you first compete against Brian Boitano?
I could tell you that I first read about Brian Boitano when I was a kid in Skating Magazine. I'm like, who's this kid from California who already has a double axel? I'm like, oh my gosh, I might as well just be done with it all, because I think I had a double toe at the time. It's like, man, you know, and then I, you know, saw him, and, you know, you'd hear he'd be doing a triple toe and then a triple lutz, but I didn't really compete against him until 82, because he was always, you know, always maybe a year ahead of me. And so I competed at nationals in Indianapolis, where he skated lights out with a triple axel double toe in the short program. Never forget it. You know, For Your Eyes Only was with music, and I was lowly way down in who knows what place. But yeah, Brian was just an incredible consistent performer, you know. And I said, Brian, you know, I remember watching him, and you'd see something and it'd be like, you actually, you missed that triple flip. You know, you could see that you didn't really get over your toe or whatever, but you landed it anyway. It's like, how'd you know? And I was like, well, I don't know. I've watched you a lot. He's like, yeah, I mean, that's the trick, is like, if you can miss it and still land it, you know, then, you know, I was like, wow, that never happened to me. So.
Well, during that time, obviously, Scott Hamilton was completely dominating as an amateur, and you would obviously be able to practice with him, you know, on ice at competition.
Yes. And also in Denver where he was skating. So, I mean, because I was between those two rinks where he was and the Broadmoor, I was able to practice with him as well at Colorado Ice Arena. So I saw him skate a lot.
What did you learn from watching him? Because I have a book that was supposed to be authorized and it wasn't, but it has interviews with Scott throughout the whole competition season when he's defending his world title. And it's very fascinating to learn about his mindset and what was going on, you know, during that.
Yeah. You know, Scott treated his skating like a business, you know, and I think that when, you know, he would, you know, he just was mature, you know, I think there was once he started to take from Don Laws, I should say, you know, when he was a kid, he was, you know, just completely different, and he'll tell you that. But to me, again, it was the neat, you know, the feet in the air, his figures were impeccable. But then, you know, he would take the third out of four parts of his program, turn it into what he called a futz, and just entertain the audience. And he would take that moment and realize that this audience came, and 5 minutes is a long time, because that's how long they were skating for, was 5 minutes. And so then he would entertain people and usually put a triple sow at the end that he could land easily. And, he had them in the back pocket, and then he could just, go to town with something, some big rousing finale, and he was a standing ovation every time. Very difficult to skate after Scott Hamilton. And I, if he ever, competed against me as a professional and he hung the In the Mood costume up in the locker room, I was like, well, I'm second. That's the best I can do.
Did you study his footwork? Because your Mohawk steps, when you fly down the ice, are very reminiscent of his.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we were skating together in shows, forever. So, but nobody gets the same kind of, I would say, just effortless revolutions per minute that he does on those Scotty turns. I mean, just literally, he is able to, create a spin and a step at the same time. And that's very difficult to do. So kudos to Scott.
During those early years
Always.
in senior, after winning World Juniors, did you put more pressure on yourself? What was kind of your mindset when you were finishing near the bottom? Were you discouraged?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, yeah. I mean, so first off, I started in the hole in figures, right? And then it was usually the short program that was difficult for me, because in those days, if you missed, like, whatever you missed, there was a mandatory deduction for it. And I struggled with my combination, and yeah, so those were disappointing years. I think, 1 year I blew the figures, the next year I blew the short, the next year, so it was just, I had, years and years where I seemed to be in fifth place. I can remember Jill Trenner said, well, fifth place in the US isn't bad, it's like, not really where I want to be. Okay.
How many years were you fifth?
So, let's see, 83, 85, 86, 87. So 4. And then I was fourth in 84. So it was either fourth or fifth for 5 years. Not good.
Would you rather get the pewter or be fifth?
They didn't have a pewter medal in those days.
Okay.
It wasn't like everybody got a trophy. They only had 3 people go to nationals from sectionals in those days too. So, like, Jimmy Santee, didn't go to nationals that 1 year with the
Why did
double
they
flip
start the
triple loop.
pewter?
Because it's something to get that close, so anyway.
To me, it's a tough medal. It's a bitter
Yes.
pill to swallow.
Yeah.
It could go either way, either joyous or the other way.
Right.
But what made you actually decide to move to Evie and Mary, and how did you go about doing that?
So 85 was a tough year for me. I was, again, I'd been fifth in 83, fourth in 84, and then fifth in 85. And I'd been injured. And I felt like I just needed to try something different, in terms of my jump consistency, and I needed to, make a break. And so we thought through different things, and Carlo was not a fan of the idea of moving to Evie and Mary, but I really believed that, that it was a good, strong possibility that it could help me. And at the time, I didn't know where they were going to be. I was moving to Wisconsin, but I heard that they were either moving to Boston or San Diego, both places which are nice. But I was really pulling for Boston because I was wanting to go to school. And that all worked out very well for me. It took a year to kind of sort out where to go to school, but I loved the Boston. The whole thing about the Skating Club of Boston was such a fit for me. It was a great place for me to kind of be in that stage of my career. There's lots of extremely supportive people there. It was serious, but everyone understood that you were, both a skater and, something else. Maybe you were going to college at the same time. And I didn't find that in other places. I definitely didn't find that in LA. I didn't find it in Colorado Springs. In Colorado Springs, you walk into that lobby and everybody is watching the Junior Grand Prix. They're huddled around a screen, and it's like, that's 100% what everyone is about. I think, for me growing up, it was like, I did my practice, I got on my bike, I went back, and then I, did the lab or the class, and then homework, and was involved with school activities. And I would go and sort of oscillate between these two places. And I think that worked very well for me.
Were you
And
stressed out?
hmm,
You stressed out or distracted or tired, or all of the above?
there were times, I mean, especially during exams. And I think Worlds always came at a really bad time of the year, because it was after the beginning. So the first 4 weeks of the semester, everything's, getting rolling. And then you have your first midterm, and, you're cramming, trying to figure everything out. And that would be the time when, Worlds would happen. So
Great.
I could remember going to one Worlds and being like, literally, I had to, do a Japanese midterm, and so I didn't go skating this one day, as I was going off to Worlds, because I had to do papers and make up all this work. Yeah, so that was a little bit of not the best, plan. And
I'm curious.
I look back on it and I'm like, why didn't somebody say, hey, why aren't you just going to the rink right now?
Well, I'm curious about one other stress at this time, because there's so much talk about improving jumps, right? And when Mawasada tried to get clean jumps after the 2010 Olympics, she was supposed to be on a 2-year plan, but the competitions always got in the way. Now, I know you've said that Evie took you back to singles and redoing muscle memory. Can you talk about how long and what the process is like, and how do you fight the panic that competition is coming up, and am I going to be ready? And I used to be doing triples and now I'm doing singles, and kind of walk us through it.
Well, I mean, when I first moved to Evie and Mary, the first 2 months of my time with them, I only did singles or even no turn jumps, because he did not feel like I, used my arms and my upper body enough. I wasn't going over my toe cleanly. And there were certain things that you can't train doing the double or the triple. He would always go back to doubles. And I think that, and singles, because it's that preparation and the pick and the entry that makes such a big difference in how you, lift, how you rotate that first rotation, and you can train it so much more safely and repeatably if you're doing a single. So yeah, I think that getting that explosive first moment, because you really have only one chance to work against gravity, and you have only one chance to begin your initial rotation. Then after that, once you have the initial rotation going, then you're narrowing the radius. But and you might have the ability to add a little bit of something with a knee or an arm, or whatever you're going to do. But you have that one shot at getting the takeoff and using your edges and your toe pick to get what it is that it starts off with.
Now, there's so much made about Mary as a choreographer, but as a technician, what kind of an influence did she have on your figures and your spins and everything that you worked with her on?
Yeah, definitely. A brilliant technician. The person who can look at something and say, "This is what's going on," and was able to kind of do it in a way that complemented whatever Evie said as well. And so there would be times when we would have to go and like pull the whole thing apart. But if we're at a competition, she could just say, this is what's going on, and it would completely, she nailed it. And she nailed also where, how to fix it. So I think that she's definitely, maybe been past, people think of her as the artistry person and not necessarily a technician. Well, she's both, and Evie also had a lot to say about the artistry. But there was nobody that sort of got me more, than Mary, in terms of, what it took to get the performance to happen, to get the jumps to happen. And I took her to all of the pro competitions later on, because I think she felt like, it was a great fit. She understood why this was really important to me, the pro competitions. And anyway, they were, and I think they were a great way to finish off my career as well.
Let's talk about the genius of her in music selections, because you two really came up with music that highlighted you so incredibly well that you could really bring out nuances too. But there's one piece of music that Mary has given many of her skaters from the 76 Olympics on. When I was rewatching it, I said, wait a second. And it's that Dear Father piece by Neil Diamond. You used it, Nancy used it. And at the 76 Olympics, the first skater to do the backflip. I'm blanking on his name, but
Terry Kubica.
Terry Kubica, yes, did this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is a Neil Diamond creation. And I think that, I think that it just has, this plaintive, very, I think that everybody dreams, everybody understands their place in the universe at some point, and for me, I have I feel a personal relationship with God. And so that helps me, and I think that we share that. And so in being able to talk about that and to express that on the ice, I think that that came through as something that was, both a great piece for skating and musically, but also a thought that I had that I wanted to, expand on in my life. We dream, and that's I don't know if you've ever read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but it's a very beautiful book, very simple, but
inspiring,
and it had its moment for sure.
I'll definitely.
But I when I think about Mary, and music selection, I mean, when I showed up to Janesville, I think that Mary thought that I was coming for a program, and she didn't realize that she couldn't get rid of me then after that. But she had already done all of the edits to the program, and it was the natural, and it was. It had the. I thought you were going to say the theme from the '76 Summer Olympics.
I wanted to ask you about that,
because that's at the end.
You had never made the Olympics before, and you're using it, and that could be double-edged. So how did that come about?
Well, I think that we definitely wanted that to happen, but it had always a very over-the-top feeling for the end, and was very hopeful. And so, but that was when I showed up in Janesville. That was my piece, and so she started there, and then we went. We did 3 years with the same piece, going into Calgary, and that was a great program for me, but it took me a while to get it.
Did the two of you strategize on your costumes, because you always wear one solid color with like billowy fabric that would kind of like go in the wind as you're skating into that Lutz? It looks like you're really fast, but the fabric is flying. Was that strategic as well?
His first move, a triple flip.
Well, Jeff Billings was my costume designer from the time after the 1990. So after 1989, he became my costume designer. And so I, attribute all of the costume thoughts and genius to him. And, Jeff worked very hard to make me look tall and, like lean, and to, I think that solid color, I think that, the speed, the billowy fabric, definitely would help that. And styles are different today than they were then as well. But there was also, within Jeff's costumes, especially as a professional, there was, I had talked to him in depth about the pieces and what was important to me. And then he went to that next level, and sort of he went to the Hebrew professor and researched what never again, how to write that, and then he put that Leolam Lo on the back of my costume, and then he put like it was like a vest, but he made the pinstripes in jagged, like black leather, but it was, if you looked closely, it was barbed wire. Nobody would have seen that, but he knew that it would make a difference to me, you know? And so every time you put that costume on, you're like, okay, this is a very important piece, you know? And it's like, you know, putting on the JFK costume, and then there's, you know, November 22nd, 1963 on the back. You know, it's very subtle. It looks like a line, but, and then there's a broken star, you know,
Didn't
those
your
those
farewell
things were
costume,
important.
didn't your farewell number for Michael Bolton have the name of your coaches in there too? Yeah.
Yeah, it had everybody that was important in my career. So it was like, and the names of different programs, and it was just, and so it was a very color on color, you know, subtle way of including the tapestry of the important people and things in my life, which I thought was such a neat idea. And that's what, you know, Jeff was brilliant with those kinds of ideas. He wasn't, you know, he didn't go and try to make something that was like splashy, because that wasn't me. You know, what he did was he went and made something meaningful, and that then helped me to, you know, feel that more in the performance, you know. And I think that he realized that was you know, what was important to me.
Yeah. Well, you've spoken so much about, you know, your mental state in 92, but in 88, you've been fifth all these years. You're finally at the Olympics. How was it? Just like euphoric, almost like manic experience, or were you overwhelmed and nervous? What was your internal state at that time?
I think that it was all of the above.
Okay.
But so, yeah, I was absolutely, you know, to make that team was a huge dream of mine. And, you know, my college roommate made a bet with me that if I got second at nationals, I owed him ice cream for the rest of his life. And I said, well, come on, like that means I would have to beat Chris Bowman. And so that's what happened. So I guess technically I owe Rob Sony ice cream for the rest of my life. So that nationals was a huge moment, big monkey off my back. But then to, you know, have the very short turnaround between that nationals and Olympics. And I mean, I was actually like still taking a couple of final exams because we had our exams after Christmas. I mean, it was a crazy time, and lots of people coming in from, you know, ABC to do up close and personals and those things. But once I got to Calgary, it was just a, you know, obviously it was a dream come true to be on that team, but there was a lot of pressure, and we had a sold out event. It was the Battle of the Bryans. And I think, you know, for the long program was not my best gait. And I think that it was very difficult for me to get my bearings. I skated very late in the order. And you know, I didn't know where my parents were. It was all the things that people talk about in their first Olympics. You know, I pin traded. I did an article for US News and World Report. I was meeting the Jamaican bobsledders, and everything was this scramble. And I think at the end of the day, the competition got a little bit lost, unfortunately. So 4 years later, I definitely approached it differently, and, you know, was much more intentional about finding time to rest and recover and be more intentional.
Talk about rooming with Christopher Bowman, because they've done many interviews about this, but he seems like he was a nightmare roommate and that you loved him at the same time.
Well, I think, you know, everybody loved Chris, and, you know, he had such a joie de vivre, if you will. And he was really fun to be around, very infectious. And yet we shared, I mean, the room that we had was easily a small single that they had turned into a double. So there was very little room, and they gave us a lot of stuff, which was really cool. But with all of the mounds of stuff, and I'm not the neatest person in the world, but with all of the mounds of things in our room, it was just really hard to keep track of where everything was. And then I think the hardest part was after the short program, which I skated well in the short program, was very excited that I landed the combination. And so went out to dinner with my parents, and we stayed out a little bit too late, and went to bed, but Chris wasn't in yet, and so I was already a little bit tired. Chris came in literally at 5 a.m. and jumped on top of my bed and was like, playing air guitar and Molly Hatchet. And, it was, I was like, Chris, are you serious? Like, this is the Olympics. So anyway, and then he went and watched, I don't know, not Apocalypse Now, but one of those really serious movies right before the long program. And that's what helped him to get dialed in. And he skated clean, of course.
Well, in 1990 and 1991, you had back-to-back years skating to the Mission with the waterfront. You had these iconic free skates at nationals, and you narrowly missed winning. How frustrating yet exhilarating was that experience?
Well, I think the hardest one was 90 because I had figures, so I was third in figures, and then I won both the short and the long. And so at that point, figures were worth what, 20% or something. So I won 80% of the competition. And I think because Chris had dropped out, then there was no way for me to, with the factors, pull up. And I felt like I had, that was probably the best I ever skated at nationals up until that point, for sure. And maybe ever. And so that was hard. But I'm glad that I had those performances, but would it have been nice to have a national title? Yes. But Todd Eldridge was always there with those figures and the consistency,
You just worked with his kids recently, right?
Yeah, I did. And it was great. I love having skating friends for life. It is really a wonderful thing. And just he's as solid an individual as he has ever been. And so anyway, I think that I feel very fortunate to have been surrounded by the people that I was surrounded by in skating, for the years that I was in them and in it. And I think, Todd is one of those people who is just salt of the earth, solid person. And so, yeah, if I had to lose to somebody at nationals, that would be the person.
How did the homage to Janet Lynn come at the end of your program when you used her music from the Olympics?
Fidelia, yeah. Well, Mary suggested it, and that Beethoven piece is just so, it's cathartic and joyful, and it was a perfect place for the second triplets. and I was a huge Janet Lynn fan. I mean, I just love watching her, and I still do. And again, this is like one of those people that if you've never watched Janet Lynn, everyone go and watch her, because there's just something breathtaking about the quality of her skating and the way that she approached the music and the ice, and even the turn of her head and the glide and the way that she leans. I mean, I learned so much from watching. So anyway, there it is. And I think that we both thought that was the right choice. And especially because with the Mission, you start off with this serious thing and you want to finish with this this glorious moment, this glorifying moment.
Nice. How terrific.
Well, after that, I want to talk to you about a competition that there's not really a lot of video of, and Flowskate, who's one of the big archivists on the internet, and we tried to write to an archive company, and he has contacts with all the archivists. People cannot find your long program from the 91 Worlds, which apparently was a phenomenal performance. And and maybe equally as good as your short program was bad. So can you kind of talk us through that competition?
Yeah. Well, oh gosh. Yeah. This was when I told you that I was doing the Japanese midterm. Okay. And so Todd Eldridge
I
got
didn't
to
know that this
Munich.
was going to help you in skating commentary later on, but this was worth it. Yes.
Yeah, so Todd Eldridge left for Worlds on Wednesday, and on Saturday I left for Worlds. Let's say that. So, and I had been not going to the rink because I was studying and getting ready for an exam, and then so I flew into Munich, went to the draw party, drew first to skate, and then the next day was the long program and the short program. So it was really, really hard. I mean, I struggled with the
First
short
time
program
without
anyway.
figures, right? Yeah.
First time without figures, knew it was a big deal. And when you draw first at a public draw party, everyone says woo, but in this particular case, people are like, ooh, that hurts, because this is the first time we're all doing this. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I missed my combination, then I missed the jump, the triplets, and then I fell on a double axel. And so it was pretty much that, disaster. And I went back and started to do homework in the hotel room. And I mean, you have like 45 skaters that you're going, you're sitting at the hotel, just hoping and praying somehow to make the cut, and I made that cut by 1/10 of a point, very, very, very fortunate. And at that point I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so ashamed. I'm so embarrassed. And there's a knock on my door from my friend who's like, let's go walk around Munich. and and so this person was able to say, look, you can't focus on yesterday or today. You have to focus on what comes next, and you have to do something that delivers that particular moment. And so I had to pull it off. And so yeah, I did. That was probably the best that I'd ever skated. And so I think NBC at the time was doing nationals, and they made a special performances, and they showed it.
Your
So
free skate from Worlds?
Yeah,
Okay.
from Worlds. So maybe that's where they should look. But yeah, that was the best I ever skated that program. And I think that it enabled people to see what was possible, but I think there were enough people who were like, yeah, we've seen what was possible in the short program. So that kid's done, and so I definitely spent the next, 6 or 8 months trying to explain why I should have a place in, on the 1992 roster of any kind, and again, had another, 1/10 of a point moment at nationals and made the Olympic team. And then 35 days later was able to, finally put the chips down in a way that I think hopefully retold that story.
Yeah. When you made the mistake in the short program at Worlds, were you feeling present?
Which one?
Well, I
You
just mean
mean in 91?
overall.
Which one of them? When I fell on my double
The
axel?
reason I'm asking is because when I skated and the first time I was going for my axle, the whole year was about the axle. Galina was like, you're just going in the program, you were doing it. And she did everything, every trick in the book she needed to make it happen out of the Soviet book, right? And I popped it the first time I went for it and did a bell jump. And for the rest of the program, I felt kind of out of body. Like almost like I was watching myself skating and mess up more and more, tripping on stupid things. Did you have that kind of a deer in the headlights sensation?
Well, it's at the end of the program. I mean, I think that, I knew that with one mistake, I was going to be having a hard time. But then to have the third mistake, I was, that I just was like, I have to get through the step sequence and the last spin and just finish. And, this is definitely the worst skate of my life, and at a Worlds. And I don't know, I don't even remember it. It was such a horrible feeling. But all I can say is that I had been skating really well, and that I then proved that in the free skate, but it was pretty disappointing.
Do you do well with adversity? Because in Scott Hamilton's book, he said that you skate well on bad ice and prefer it over good ice.
Really?
He said he wrote this whole thing in his book that if there's really bad ice, you're the one skater that will do well.
Oh, really?
It's in
That's
his
funny.
autobiography. Yeah, when he describes you. Yeah.
Wow, that's so nice. I think adversity is, I feel akin to it somehow. I feel like I'm, that I've gone through a lot of it in terms of my skating career, and had to, sort of think about, like, when you're teetering on the edge, let's pull this out. But I guess my philosophy has always been, you get the ice that you get, but that's nice of him to say.
Yeah.
I wish it were true.
How much so after that Worlds, how hard did you work going into 92 Nationals?
It was quite a summer, and I think that Evie really focused on video and getting me to feel the rotation that I needed to get on the triple axel. And he came up with a really great technical change that he made, and it was probably 8 weeks before the Olympics. That helped my triple axel a lot. But you work, I guess, in the same, as hard as you can, but I didn't have school to worry about as much. But that being said, it was the first time that I had focused only on skating, and so it was really weird. But I was added to the La Ligue trophy at the last minute, because Christopher Bowman had been deported from Canada, where he was training with Tyler Cranston, and so they added me to that team. And I think that was a great gift to me, because I was able to see myself there. I competed with Kurt Browning, competed with the people that didn't have a particularly good skate there, but just having had the mileage under my belt there, helped me once I got there. I think I think Orlando Nationals was, I didn't skate fantastically in the short program, but kind of well enough. And then I had, I stepped out of both triple axles in my program. The rink was very narrow there. And, but I did 2 triple axles. So that was the thing. It was kind of like, I was the only guy who was trying to, compete at that top level. Chris wasn't doing a triple axel. But at the end of the day, like, I got off the ice and I was like, I don't know whether I made it or not. And I sat backstage, and then it came down to, the 1/10 of a point. And then they had that famous meeting of the international committee, like they have, and they decided to send me to Olympics and Mark Mitchell to Worlds. And it was a tough decision, because, Todd Eldridge had pulled out because he had an injury. And, he was able to recuperate enough to come. And so Mark had to be left home. And, he had skated well. And so at any rate, I think there was I felt a lot of responsibility, to pull it off, once I went there. And so I can remember the day after skating in Orlando, went to Walt Disney World with the same friend that walked around Munich with me. And he was like, we got 35 days, this is it. And, sort of like one of those mentory kind of people. And so I went back to my sports psychologist, and I said, I have 35 days between now and the end of my career. And he's like, what are you going to do about it? And so it was, I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like enough time. And, well, you have what you have. And so make use of what you have. And so I hadn't done the back-to-back run-throughs cleanly of my free skate program with the 2 triple axles. And I wasn't sure it was even possible, but Evie was like, go for it. Let's do this. And so I was able to do that twice, back-to-back run-throughs of my long program clean. And a lot of people thought that was just insane. But for me, it's what I needed to sort of say, okay, I am ready. And like I said, Evie did help me with that. It was like moving my free leg like a spiral staircase and into the triple axel position, because I'd never thought of using my free leg to help me get some rotation.
Mhm.
My free leg was always kind of going out, and then I was going to catch up with it. But instead, the free leg, then I was thinking about it like a spiral staircase and going into that tight, trying to get tight as quickly as possible, because, we were all about, big, giant, so, and that helped a ton. And I was able to get, much more consistent. And then I was kind of a different skater in 35 days. So it's
Did,
possible, everyone.
did Abby ever get you a triple loop? Because you do every jump textbook. Where is the triple loop, Paul?
I had a triple loop, and it was really not good. So here's the problem, okay? And for all of you people, who are like, why do we do the, why do we have our head to the right and our arms to the right and all this stuff? It's because, your head and your shoulders want to keep doing all of this work for you and make it happen. And that actually slows you down and makes you, twist out of the circle. Well, I could not, as a child, I struggled with a double loop. I had a wrap, a very embarrassing, Dallas wrap. And so, to get a triple loop was a big deal. I landed it one time in competition. It was not my jump. And in those days, you had to choose. And so I had 2 flips, 2 lutzes, and an axle, or 2, whatever. And, I usually had 2 lutzes and 2 axles. And so it's like, it was enough with what I had. So yeah, it was not a big triple loop doer.
Okay. Now, when you talk about a double run through back to back, is it the amount of time in between is like rewinding the tape of a cassette?
Yes.
What? Okay.
We might have had a CD.
Okay.
And so you might have had to, imagine the time that would take to rewind it. But basically, very little time for that recovery to set. Yeah. But what it makes you do is, focus on what can become automatic.
Mhm.
So
So
I'm a big fan of it.
How mentally it has to be important too.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I was only ever able to do the back-to-back run-throughs clean in the Olympic seasons. And I think that tells you something. Yeah.
Interesting. What do you remember about the Olympic short program skating at?
I told you already that in the warm-up I wiped out twice on my triple axel. I can remember standing backstage and taking my pulse and having Evie, talk me through the feet together. And I remember thinking about the edge on the takeoff. And, it was this moment when, you have played that particular moment so many times in your life where you're standing on the edge and you're going to step, that the timing of stepping from right foot to left foot on that triple axel it becomes this epic step, and you have to convince yourself to just lean into it, so to speak. And anyway, I look back at it and it's like, why was I so nervous about that? But it was literally the most important success that I'd ever had, was being able to land that. And then to follow it up with a great triple flip, and even a double axle is missable, so even a camel spin is missable, and in those days in the short program, it was like you got deductions for everything. So it had to be clean or else forget about it. So
were you feeling more nervous the better you skated in that short program, or were you pretty confident after that axle?
After the combination, I was feeling very confident, but you can get too confident too, so I think you just have to keep yourself aware, slowing things down. I did one of those things where, after we had to do spin with 15 turns, so it was like camels and splits, and anyway, I came out of it going the wrong way. So I like literally went to the other end that I should have for my double axel. But you know, you do what that happens to you all the time. So okay, whatever, you know.
The judges are also rating spins. Great position on this camel spin. In this change of foot spin, they have to have 15 total rotations. Anything less is a deduction. A double axel. Again, it's an easy jump. Todd Eldridge missed his. Beautifully done. This is about as well as I've ever seen Paul Wylie deliver an original program.
And so it didn't end up in the exact same spot that it should have ended up in. But when I look back on it, I think it's one of my most important successes in life, you know, was skating cleanly there with all of the chips down, you know, because there wasn't, you know, if I had missed, I would have been, you know, it didn't matter how low I could go, you know, 35th, whatever. So,
Well,
but then I was in third place, right? So.
Well, you told a story that you went to a sports psychologist and that they told you to imagine what if everything goes right. And I thought that was one of the most interesting things.
That happened right after the short program, right? So, I literally, you know, left the building in third place, you know, after, you know, that afternoon I had sat down with the ski jumpers who had regaled me with stories of how they had fallen on their shoulder and this thing had happened and that thing. And I was like, you know what, my life isn't, I don't have to worry about like near death experiences when I'm skating.
Yeah.
And then they all showed up to the program to cheer me on, which was really fun. But so I left that night, you know, left the building in third place, which was, you know, really huge for me. But then I thought to myself, third place. So now everyone would expect you to, you know, people that don't necessarily know skating would expect you, well, you're in third place after the short program, you might as well just kind of get third place overall. And then I was like, but, you know, behind me was, you know, just a litany of great skaters, you know. So from Todd Eldridge, Christopher Bowman, Elvis Stoico, Kurt Browning, you know, I mean, it was just like, and I was like, any one of them, you know, could have just, you know, snap their fingers and go. But, you know, I think that's why I went to Shane and from the sports psychology team, because my sports psychologist wasn't there, but I went to him and he had the best advice, which was, you know, what about taking a half an hour first off and just saying to yourself, wow, that was amazing. You know, that sort of gratitude moment and thinking about, you know, what happens if everything goes right? What happens if I skate the performance of my life, right? What changes? What are the benefits, you know? And, you know, I was thinking about like just the lifelong sense of success that I would have, that I was able to kind of put the demons to rest, so to speak, or whatever, you know, kind of overcome those difficulties that I'd had. And then I thought I might probably get into whatever grad school I wanted to go to, and you know, there was all these other things, you know, might be able to skate professionally and have that be meaningful. Like little did I know how much all three of those things were really going to be true. And but I think that for the wisdom in it was to have taken that moment and instead of stewing, you know, and thinking about, you know, the ways in which the rest of the world was looking at this moment, you know, and how if I didn't measure up, you know, to that I would seem like even more of a failure because I had blown it, you know, rather to say, I have the possibility of actually rewriting the last chapter of this career, you know, and you know, it wasn't necessarily me, you know, God put me in that position and, you know, gave me that opportunity, and that 35 days had gone as it did, you know, and I think that it was all meant to be a story to myself, but to others too, you know, which is, it's not over.
Mhm.
It's not over.
When you did finish that long program at the Olympics, internally, what were you thinking?
Every Olympic performance impacts the rest of your life. And this Olympic performance will definitely impact Paul Wylie's in the most positive way.
I was thinking this was the end of my career, and I am so glad to have been able to be a skater and to be on this world stage. And I have no idea where I will finish because I didn't watch anybody. It wasn't particularly my best skate. It wasn't the best skate of the week at all. And the ice had not been very great there, to be
Okay.
honest. But I was thrilled to be done. You know what I mean? And to have given it a solid try.
Did you enjoy the
And
performance?
I enjoyed parts of it.
Okay.
I could tell you that,
You're Ina Bauer. You look like you're living, like you're having a moment in time. Yeah.
Paul Wylie graduated from Harvard last spring, degree in government. Plans to attend law school. This his last amateur appearance. Skating to the music of Henry V.
And look at the line and extension on this Ina Bauer.
No, I mean, I think that program was very special, and people had sent me notes and things like that, which was basically like, do you know the story of Henry V? So I was like, oh, I guess I didn't really know that story. And, so it was kind of an incredible, connection to make, but like little things I can remember thinking about, like my mother, my mom's mom, my grandmother had passed away the summer before, and I had played her the music, and she was an organist. So she loved the Saint-Saëns organ symphony, and she was very much an artist. And so I had thought about her in the program and about how, maybe she was watching or whatever, and so that Nana was, getting a front row seat. And, it was little things like that that were more about, like, that were more personal, where you're not necessarily thinking about, okay, I got to get ahead of this person or that person. It was just, this closure to 24 years of skating, that started on that rink in Aspen. That, it was part of that. It was an expression of joy, that I was able to reach that point in my career. This chubby little kid from Texas, then was able to, compete on the world stage and take a shot at it. And then the marks come up and you're like, wow, my name's in second place. Like, you never know, like in 5 people, I might, if I happen to beat all these other people, then I could be in second or third. And so it was like that, it was like, I could be an Olympic medalist, it had never dawned on me. I always wanted to be, of course, your whole life, you want to be that. But then you get you get the opportunity and you're like, oh, I hope I'm not, fourth or fifth or whatever, and you're like, what? And if I am, there it is, because I think that you make peace with those things. So thrilling to be able to, to earn the silver medal and step up on the podium.
Well, that was such a win for you. People do argue that you should have won. Did you ever let that enter your head? Have you gone through that in your mind? Or
Yeah, I haven't. I think that it's pointless, right? And I think it's really nice of people to say that, And
Because you're very adamant that Nancy should have won, and people feel on behalf of you the same way. Yeah.
well, in Nancy's case, I think that she really had some superior content, and Victor Petrenko did a triple axel, triple toe, which was pretty awesome. He did follow a double axel, and so whatever, I mean, he'd been, second in the world. He'd been, bronze medalist, 4 years before. So, and I didn't skate the performance of my life. I kind of screwed up my triple sal, and, so I look at it,
Mary was
and I
upset
think
about that double lutz at the end of the program, and we interviewed
yes,
her. We asked her what she thought
yeah,
at the end of your program, and she said, "I couldn't believe you doubled the lutz." And
right,
so
yeah. Well, I have to tell you what happened. We didn't skate on Olympic rinks, at home. And so, you go to the Olympic rink and it's a lot bigger, and you're not rushing to get to the triple axel, the second one. So you're like sort of skating to the outside of the edge and you're waiting for the jump, and I was late for the flying camel, I mean, I had like, I don't know, in these days I never would have made it because I didn't have enough rotations, but there was no time. And so I'm late coming down the ice, and and then again, I felt that the ice felt squirrely to me, and I was worried about tapping and, missing my toe. And, I'm sorry that I second guessed myself, but at the same time, it is what it is, right? It worked out. Yes.
yeah.
So, and I think, what I feel fortunate about was that we were so fortunate to have the pro career that followed, and that the skaters today don't have what we had as pros. And just to be able to then go and compete with Victor and Scott and Brian Orser and Kurt Browning and people in these different competitions, and to tour with Stars on Ice, and to have the ability to move in directions and with music, and and even group numbers and fun projects, with other skaters. It was thrilling, and we were so fortunate to have that. And I'm sad for the skaters today that they don't have that same thing.
Well, tell us about your iconic duet with Nancy Kerrigan. That was a favorite for many years.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
um, well, it started because we were both really into Miss Saigon,
Mhm.
and Nancy went to see the show she went to Skate Electric, which was a international in England. And I don't know, I loved that music. And Mary, said, I wanted to skate to Why God, and then she wanted to skate to that piece. And so she said, I think we should just put a number together for the Jimmy Fund or something, to this, place in this world, whatever, and it was a hit. We did it at the Jimmy Fund show, and then we did, they asked us to do it at nationals. And so, we're at the Olympics. I mean, so first off, when you're done at the Olympics, they don't have practices every day for you, right? I was, and I was out skiing and, enjoying myself for a week, like no skating whatsoever. And they're, the people from CBS says, great, we'd like you to do the duet with Nancy. I was like, oh boy, we haven't done that in a while. So like literally the morning of, we were like, okay, reminding ourselves of it. And we're like, okay, this is a crazy idea. Let's see what happens. And And, the picture was on the cover of the Boston Globe, I mean, it was a big deal. And you forget where the Olympics are in the psyche of the American public, and like when I'm watching the Olympics, I'm, glued to it. And those people become like, I instantly want to know them. I want to, celebrate them. And so I think that people were there with us. And we're such, we're close friends, and we're, we came from the same, the same coach, the same rink. We'd been through a lot of things together. And so I think that read a little bit in what we did. So anyway, I'm very proud of that moment. I mean, we, our big throw axle,
Yes.
But just to be able to, I think sometimes those frivolous moments are, everything is so darn serious in our sport that you don't get that, person to person connection as much. And I think that we were very lucky again to have that. And I think it was really smart that the CBS people decided to put it in.
You talk about frivolous moments, and there's one silly move that Mary does, not silly, but in every program in the grand scheme of, elements.
Yeah.
And it's a change from an inside to an outside edge, or outside to inside, and you do it forwards and put your arm up. Now, Jenny says a shram. What is the origin of this move? Because it's in all of your programs, all of Nancy, and it always fits the music very nicely.
Skaters are close to the boards always. It's like they wait and wait and wait until they can't finally have to do it or crash.
Yeah, I don't know what she would call it, but and I mean, for the purpose of it, I'd have to say that it fills the music, right? And there's a lean to it, and there's a emotional quality to it. And so I don't know why Mary always puts it in.
Yeah. I love it. Yes.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that's one of the things that Mary is known for, and those signature those signature moves. I mean, when I think about, when we started working together, and I mentioned that the first program was The Natural, right? And so I don't know if you remember the music, but it's just these it's Randy Newman, and it's very simple, natural. Da, 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 so it's those notes, but it's, and it started off with a forward outside 8, forward outside, and then the spiral. And then, I think that was the first thing that Mary ever did choreographically for me. And it was literally like the first day I got there, and I thought to myself, wow, this is different. To be able to, that's powerful. There was
This opening section of his program, different from the rest of his program, it shows extraordinary flow. Great forward motion. Very quiet.
There was something that I was like, I love that, and and Mary would always obsess over the opening position and the first, 10, 20 seconds of something. And I'm like, okay, but it was huge because it totally set the tone for what was to come. It was almost like, key to all that followed it, like at the beginning of the mission with, the spiral down the ice, or the beginning of Schindler's List, which was backwards, and anyway, all of it, JFK, all of those programs that started off with setting the tone, which you can't do anymore because you don't have any time. So it was a different world, different world.
Well, David Santee said that your Apollo 13 is his favorite program of yours, and I think he's wrong. But your Carmina Burana is so incredible, the amount of emotional energy you're putting in. And I always remember you coming off the ice like buckets of sweat from the amount of energy you were giving in this. And the lights went out at one competition, and you still
He's chosen music of Carl Orff, performed by the Atlanta Symphony and Chorus under the direction of Robert Shaw. Carmina Burana.
performance of his life to remain in this competition.
In Albertville in 1992 was as good as he could skate when he skated to Henry V. This was just extraordinary.
Oh. Who was turning the lights out? Was Christopher Bowman here? Chris, you shouldn't do that.
That was an amazing day, you know, because it was at the tail end of the season. We were in Florida. We're doing something. I'm skating with Karen Kadavi. We're clearly not gonna, you know, win the competition, you know, but I don't know, that particular piece is so intense, you know, and Mary had come down and I wanted to skate it clean. I wanted to skate it well. And I don't know, there's just such an intensity to that. And there's a focus of that intensity of the emotion of the, you know, just, and then the lights went out. And so then you're just like, okay, this is interesting. You know, you're like, do it anyway, you know, because I think your whole life, everybody said, keep going, you know, and so then you landed and then all of a sudden the lights come back on and you're just like, well, that was kind of dramatic. Anyway, yeah.
How about winning in Landover? Because this was my favorite competition to watch as a kid. I think from the pageantry that there's the black curtain and all of the Oh,
There it is. The turkey platter.
You have the judges look like they have the library lights next to,
Yes.
yes, and tuxes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it first of all is not it was not an easy competition to win, and Brian Boitano was not there.
Mhm.
So um and so that helped. But there was, there was something about it where Dick Button, he was the one who created the idea of Landover, and he said, I want the skaters to decide what technical program means and what artistic program means. And it can be whatever length you want it to be, well, within reason, less than 5 minutes or whatever. And so you have enough rope to hang yourself on, if you know what I mean. But I had grown up watching this competition, and we had talked a lot about the vaunted turkey platter and trying to get there. And so this one particular year, I was like, I have the chance to do this. And so, we decided to put the triple axel in the short program, and I think I don't know, I probably stepped out of it or something. It wasn't perfect. But then the long program, I think I did the Untouchables. But it was we were the last event at the end of the night. And there's something about that particular competition where it felt exhausting. It was like 11 o'clock and you'd been there from 6 o'clock, right? And but the men's event was last, and Dick was like, yes, the men's event should be last. And so this is how it is. And so everybody needs to, have that moment, the pièce de résistance, and so, that's a lot to live up to. And I think that just being able to, sort of put my version of what, skating, artistry, and athleticism was, and have it be, a world championship, that was a thrill. And to be able to win Landover was, wonderful. So I have that turkey platter right here.
Thoughts on I, Tonya?
My
Tonya.
thoughts on I, Tonya.
Yes, because
Um,
you
yeah.
lived through this experience,
I
and you
did.
kind of remained the moral compass of it, right?
Yeah.
With all of the pageantry and the movie and the fanfare and
Yeah.
everything in the camp, you've really kind of remained the moral compass of the event.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel terrible for Tonya because of the way that she had been convinced that, this was a possibility, a thing to think about. So and I think Margot Robbie did an amazing job. I think that the movie is it's super compelling dramatically. It's just still surreal, I think, to think about that somebody thought that was, the right way to approach this.
Mhm.
And that they wouldn't get caught. And to think about all of the different ways that the different things that they had to do getting on planes and scoping out exits, and the criminality of it just is still a little bit like, wow, this is figure skating, guys. But it was, it was part of their plan. And I just think that that's completely sad. I think it's sad for Tonya. She was a talented skater. And I can remember being in Sun Valley in the summers. And one time I went there and she did this triple flip, and she was like, what's hard about it? She was always like very competitive with the guys. And I don't know. I think it's just a real shame that's what it came to.
When
Now,
she was late to the ice at the Olympics, the world feed that they showed on the Olympic channel shows you having a very natural reaction to where she was. What was going through your mind?
Well, I mean, I just wasn't sure whether it was being staged or, however this was going about. But I just thought, man, oh man, it was the exact opposite of the way that I would have handled it, and I think that it would have been, and so whatever happened, I can't even fathom trying to keep it together in that moment, with a blade situation or whatever it was. But, as I was talking through it on the radio, I think you have to remind people that this is not the first time that something like this has happened in skating, but also to Tonya, and so I don't know. And I felt, I felt like they're, you have to focus on the other skaters as well, and I think there were other skaters who were like, this whole circus has drawn the attention off of us, and so anyway, that was quite an event in our sport, and it absolutely, it definitely rose the level of all boats that year and for several years, in terms of people watching TV and being interested in skating. And for that, I'm really thankful and was thankful. And I can't imagine, if you had told me that was going to happen 3 years before, I would have said that's ridiculous. That couldn't possibly happen, so.
Yeah.
Because I think that there was a skater there talented enough to compete, on her own merits.
Well, when you talk about things that people think couldn't possibly happen, when you had your running accident and you had a heart attack, can you talk us through that? I had a roommate who passed away from a heart defect that she didn't know that she had. Was this genetically something that you knew? Did you know anything or? Yeah.
No. So, what I had was sudden cardiac arrest, which is an electrical episode. And so basically the beats per minute went wildly out of control. And I, essentially blacked out. And then my heart stopped and it was out. And if it weren't for the people that were there, the two guys that got on me and just started doing CPR immediately, I would not be here. And if they had not gotten on, 1 second or 5 seconds or, 3 minutes earlier, I would have, diminishing brain capabilities with the amount of time that I would have been out. So what do you do with that information? I mean, it's to think about like your brain and how fragile it is. And then that those people were there, that they were willing to, risk being wrong, doing it incorrectly, to like pound on my heart, to break bones, to do whatever it took to, keep going after 5 minutes while the people came from the paramedics. And then for the paramedics, they did the paddles, but they did them twice and they didn't revive me. So then they, decided to do the injection of whatever it is, and then that revived me. So just the process of the events and then being able to, I was at a hospital within 5 minutes. They put me into a coma that was 2 days long. I was cooled, which is sort of what they do with people these days. And I came out of it, and the first thing I said was health insurance. I was not sure, like, if we'd paid our health insurance premium, we were on Obamacare, and the doctor had been telling Kate, well, you'll know pretty much the second he wakes up whether he has the wherewithal. And she, he looked at her and says, "You're gonna be just fine."
Were you considered actually dead at that
Dead.
point? Because did you see your body? Because there are so many stories of people after. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, so the thing is that they give you a lot of drugs to keep you in the coma, or to put you in the coma, keep you in the coma. So I think that those, totally wiped out any memory that I had of the, anything. No, I don't remember anything. All I remember was waking up and there were people around me, and it was really confusing. And I just kept saying, how did I get here? And they said, well, you were at an F3 workout, which is F3 is these free workouts all over the country. And there was one that I went to at 5:15 in the morning, which I never go to because it's considered the hardest running one. And I'm not a runner. And but I was training for something, and I was like, really? I went to that one? And they're like, yep. I met the guy, in the hospital for the first time that had saved my life. And just kind of amazing to think through, and makes you really want to make sure that and are very confident in giving CPR to somebody. And in knowing, and having the wherewithal in the moment to go and call 911 and get them to that. Those seconds matter, that you don't flip out and become hysterical, that move through very logical steps. And I'm so fortunate that people did, and that they were, fast and thought fast on their feet, and then that they were able to, give me immediately the, once I came out, they gave me the ICD, which is, it's a pacemaker defibrillator. And so I have one of those. But then they also learned while I was there that I had a birth defect. So I had I had a bicuspid aortic valve. And so instead of a Mercedes-Benz looking aortic valve, I have one that has it's just two, so it's split down the middle. And so that tends to spill and get stenosis. And so that was starting to also go. And so 2 years later, I had to have open heart surgery. So I have an artificial, it's a pig valve. So I have one of those. So yeah, heart wise, and I have been really good, for the past few years, so I feel like I'm trying to be in shape and keep myself in cardiovascular shape, and eat correctly and all of that. But yeah, you realize that you can't always account for all the good things that happen to you. And so there it is.
Did it change your
I'm very,
mindset?
very fortunate. Absolutely. And I think, it caused me to, yes, you're absolutely grateful, but you're also petrified of oh my gosh, really? That was that close to happening. Right. And anyway, it's chilling to think about, especially with the kids where they were and now are in their lives, and, you leave, it would have left behind, kids who are, in middle school and lower school, So anyway, very glad for the alternative to have happened. And I spend a lot of time talking about, get your training in CPR.
Have you spoken with Todd Sand?
Yes, I have. I just saw him last week, and he's looking great. It was wonderful to see him. And he is doing all the right things. He's caring for himself. Jenny's caring for him and their career. And it's a lot, there's so much to go through at this point. And it's only been 5 months, for them. But they have a son going off to college in a week or two. And so it's life continues to happen. And to talk with Jenny about, planning for the competitive season. I mean, she's got all of these teams that she has to work on. And meanwhile, Todd's doing a lot of therapy and working through those things. So it really put things into perspective. And, I'm just continuing to pray for him and for the doctors, and hope that, things continue to build on the success that they've already had. I mean, he's, I think that the fact that the kidneys are working now and those kinds of things are really, really great. So, and just it was wonderful to see him and to be with him as Todd, and so that part is, very much there. You can feel the heart in him. And he's always been, we're sort of the same era, us two. He was actually a little bit even before me, because he competed, for Denmark in, I don't know, the early 80s, mid 80s. Yeah. So.
No, as you think about your legacy, one of the awards you have that not many people know much about is this Ulrich Salchow trophy that Dick Button got and passed it down to John Misha Petkovic, who passed it down to you.
Right. I mean, so cool, right?
Who would you give it to? And is Jason Brown on that list, of someone that you think is keeping that part of sport together?
Yeah. That's a very good one. That's a very good one. I mean, how this came about was Ulrich Salchow, approached Dick Button after the 1947 World Championships, and Ulrich felt that they gave the championship to the person who was, more the political choice, and that Dick was this young skater with all of this talent, and he did not want to have him leave Stockholm without having a trophy. And so it was kind of like that moment in Indiana Jones, where he's like, come, pick out whichever trophy you would like, and so Dick is like, well, I mean, I could pick out this big giant, one, and then I could pick, I need to make sure that I pick out the right one, And so, he picked out an absolutely glorious one from a competition that Ulrich Salchow won in 1900 in London, and at the Niagara competition, who knows what it is, but it's just ornate and beautiful silver, classic style. And so, and Dick felt like, after having had it for so long, he felt like he wanted to give it to somebody who was perpetuating the sport in a certain way that had not won a particular championship. And so he wanted to give it to Misha. And so he gave it to Misha in 1973. And then, Misha, for some reason, decided to give it to me, which was completely humbling. Misha was just a huge hero of mine, because of the skating. I mean, the guy could jump like you read about, but also the Harvard thing and the Rhodes Scholarship. And I mean, just an amazing, successful, thoughtful person. And then, with Paul George and some other people, we were saying we'd really like to perpetuate this and make this something that lasts into the future. And so with the help of the U.S. Figure Skating Foundation and U.S. Figure Skating, they're going to make it something that's perpetuated, and it'll be awarded every 4 years. And I mean, I think that Jason is certainly one of those athletes, who has not won a world championship, but has changed the sport by being in it. So, but I'm not the only person that makes the decision. So,
What do you think of his performance last season? How important do you think he is for the sport?
Well, what I love about Jason is that he is able to continue to grow artistically and athletically, and kind of not pay attention to, the fact that all around him it's like quad axle, or 5 quads a program and that kind of a thing. And that, when you watch him skate, there is a purity of, that, the energy that he has. I remember watching him skate as a kid, and being like, man, amazing, amazing consistency of technique. And then to watch him develop as an artist, and to see him, work with the different choreographers. So very exciting, and just excited to see what happens next with him.
Well, you had dinner recently with one of my dearest friends, Ann Jensen, and she said that the two of you fixed all the problems in skating.
Oh, yes.
If there's anything you would change, what would you like to see improved?
That's a very long conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Really? Yeah.
We'll do a part 2 another time.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
For me, I feel like just the way it comes down to this essay question that I think would be a great essay question to ask kids today. And they might not have even thought about it, but the essay question would be: the computer made everything better. Discuss. The computer made everything worse. Discuss. And, kind of choose, and then decide, what it is, and how, so that you had an understanding of how the computer is dictating what's going on in our sport today. And I'm not saying that there is a perfect way of judging figure skating, but I think that there are some aspects of the way the code of points and these, things, the way the additive nature of the positives, the way all of these things kind of get in. And the number of elements, the sheer number of elements that are in the program, the busyness of programs, like all of those things make it a little bit it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose when you're watching a skating performance. Now, when you're watching somebody who's blowing the doors off of it, it is amazing, right? But I kind of long for a moment of simplicity or a program of simplicity. I long for athletes to have the opportunity to skate professionally and to perform in a way that may not be just about the ticking off 7 different jump boxes, or having their spins convoluted. And I'm sort of showing you my bias, but that you never see their face because they're constantly turning different directions and doing clusters of this and that. There's a tyranny of the difficult that has that strikes me. And I've said this before, but I took a course on French narrative painting in college. And they had this moment where they had these salons and they would judge who had the best art. And they would say, here are the criteria. And then they would sit down, and then everybody would, put their art up on the wall. And then they would say, this is the grand champion. This is this. And there's something about when you cause people, to judge something artistic, and you're dictating what the criteria are, that you wind up creating something that is not necessarily a feeling kind of piece. And so I would like for there to be more of an opportunity for that expression. And it comes out of, what happens after the French narrative painting is, that you get impressionism. You get something that just completely breaks free and says, you know what, it's only about how we feel, and so, and I'm not saying that that's perfect either, but I really would like to see the artistic side of skating, the freedom and the emotion re-expressed somehow. So I think that was the thing that Anne and I talked about, that we were musing about. I mean, and the quality of the skating and the jumps and things like that is just unbelievable to watch, and it is so exciting to see these incredible athletes do what they're doing and dare to continue to, raise the bar on themselves. And I just want to see, sort of that the heart continue to, kind of translate for the sport and for the art of skating. And,
Well,
so that we have that Janet Lynn moment, So.
I share that opinion. And I think it's interesting because when you were a commentator, I don't know that I've ever heard someone know the IJS inside and out as much as you did as a commentator, which I don't know if they were feeding to you, but you knew the numbers of those combinations. And when Johnny Weir missed the quad, you knew how many points he just lost.
Oh, dear. Yeah. It may or may not have been in the notes, but yeah. I have to say that, I had to learn it quickly, and I think that, I definitely had to, because for me, it's a system, right? And so you have to understand what is going on. What are they rewarding? Why do they, why is this person being here and that person being there? And it is much more cut and dry, but also the way that the system is, developed determines somewhat what the outcome is. And I think that we, as the people who love the sport, at some level, we need to say, is that the outcome we really truly want? And if not, then what do we do to change it? How do we change it? That and make it fair? And is there something else that exists other than just the competition for these incredibly important medals? And is there something that's an artistic prize to reach? And yeah, so anyway, those are the things that I think about a lot. And I think about the fact that I was very fortunate to have had both the opportunity to compete in the games with the 6.0 system, but then also have the professional competitions to have, and then also the Stars on Ice experience with, we were able to skate with people from all over the world because, most people were coming here at that time. So, Katya and Sergey were here, and we had Katarina Vet and Torval and Dean. I mean, everyone was on our tour. It was like, hey guys, here we are. You're skating with your heroes. And so it was a real dream. And so I'm glad that I was able to be a part of it, and I try to give back as much as I can so that people know, what that was like.
Well, I have three last questions for you. You were in the Lucy videos, the instructional series, which are the most incredible in-depth instructional video I think I've ever seen, but he seemed completely intimidating yet charming and funny. What was that experience? And he's yelling about the length of your axle and you waited too long, and he's very upset about this during the video.
Yes.
Ready. He's waiting much too long. Hey, Paul, why do you wait so long in there?
Because I'm trying to think about getting it right, you know what I mean? I know, don't think.
And time goes by.
Okay.
You should take the double axle right out here. Right there, you're ready for it.
Okay.
Take it. Why the hell does he wait so long? Jesus Christ. Why do you take so much time?
Because I'm trying to think of all the things I
You
have to
can't.
remember.
That's why you lose.
So you want me not to do any of it? Or
I
else
want
I'll
you to
forget it.
stop right here.
Okay.
I'm dead serious. You're gonna make every damn one of them that way.
Okay.
Now try it. Let's go. Hands out. Right there. Good.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. You see what I'm trying to do? The longer you wait, the tougher it is for you to take off. There's no use doing it that way. Take it again, come on. Hands out. Get ready. Set. Go. You know what happened to you? You're using much too much eyes in everything that you've done. I looked at you the other day in the big ring. You want the whole goddamn ring to do something. Why?
You saw that freestyle?
Only a freestyle, yes. You're taking hours to do something. Then you get into deliberation when to do it, and then it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
I think I sent you a ski jump. You don't deliberate there anymore.
That's true.
Don't you see how easy it is now?
Yeah.
As long as you ride that blade on an edge there, get going. Take another one now. Take it even sooner. You ready? And up. Jesus Christ. Maybe you learned something.
Yeah, I think so.
Jesus Christ. How simple is it now?
That was pretty easy, those last three.
But as you understand what I'm talking about, you can't say now.
Yeah.
You had enough of that. You finally see you skate now, just now. Not this. I don't want to hold my breath in anything like that, honestly, Pete.
Yes. I mean, when I look back at that, so at that particular moment in my career, I had really, I hadn't made it. I hadn't made the Olympic team or anything. And Mary said, let's go to Lake Placid. I'd really like you to meet and work with Gus. And so this was an amazing opportunity. And he was this force of nature, and this person that, was by far the most influential, coach ever. And could like Evie, but even more so, like could say one thing and then you're moving your arms and you're feeling something completely different. You're feeling the height of it. And I had just gotten new skates. And so that's my excuse, and I could not step fast enough, for what and it felt wrong to step that fast. And so and he was getting frustrated, but man, just to be able to be in the same room, to be, critiqued by someone who had taught Dick Button, how to do the first double axel, had, was the inventor of, these arms and, crossing your legs and, things that, it was a real opportunity. And I was trying to be as humble as possible, just do whatever I could to please the man. So,
All right. Second question. What is the
by the way,
origin of the arms on this spin? On the where you bring your arms up and down, and how do you do this?
Yes. Well, I think it started, I mean, I don't know whether it was Carmina Burana or maybe it was probably in Henry V. I think it was to give the sense of that like intensity, right? And that's all you do is you bring your arm from here down, and you keep moving them all the way down to your ankles, right?
Okay.
But quickly, and because you're turning, it has this kind of cool effect. And I probably overused it.
I don't know. It was iconic, but
right here or there.
We joke about watching melatonin skating after we take, your sleeping aid to go to bed at night, and you put on old school relaxing skating. Who are you watching?
Who do I watch? Well, I mean, I would say I love to watch Janet. I love to watch that, that era of skater. And Torval and Dean, I love to watch, today. I mean, I am super curious about the way that these athletes are getting the rotations that they're getting. And so that's quite fascinating. And, to see, just the explosiveness that the athletes are capable of doing. As a coach, I think it's very important to be a student of that technique because, there's certain things that we took for granted that we did. And then I think that there's a different way of moving shoulders that, is sort of more standard today. And so I have a hard time getting my head around it because I know that if I had tried to do that, my head would have gone out the circle and I would have been, just like my triple loop, wrapping it or doing something crazy. But at any rate, I do love to watch that. And, but I mean, I would say that if I had to, if I had to bring to a desert island performances, the Michelle Kwan, a good, beautiful Curry, Janet Lynn, I mean, and so why am I drawn to the lyrical stuff so much? But I mean, I think that I also loved the fact that Janet would take risks with certain pieces of music. I mean, you don't think about skating to Debussy as being a risk these days, but in those days it certainly was, and so anyway, I guess I just revealed my favorite.
Well, this has been such a thrill. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will definitely be emailing you, gowylie@me.com for lessons.
Okay, great. Please. Yeah, just, I mean, I do seminars, I, come and, I could probably help most of your skaters, and I definitely love to work with adults. I'll be here in Lake Placid for Adult Skating Week and, hit me up. You can come here. I can come there. It works great for me. And please, when you talk to Dorothy, tell her that I love her skating.
I will.
And I think one of the biggest thrills that I had was when she allowed me to skate with her at an evening with champions, and we skated together, and that was really wonderful. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. And speaking of Lake Placid, you talked about different events. I know that Debbie Thomas is mounting a comeback after the struggles.
I know.
Championship.
Yep. And I think that's going to be really exciting. I think I'll be here. Be here for that. And then we have something coming up at the Skating Club of Boston, which is the Dick Button Artistic Skating Festival, the second weekend in October. So that'll be October 13th and 14th. And so it'll be American Ice Theater of New York, Ice Dance International, and Next Ice Age, and probably a special guest performance from people. Not sure exactly who yet, but it's going to be symposia, on ice stuff, and then the gala as well. So that's going to be exciting. And an evening with champions is happening again. Also, that will be the first weekend in September. So just a busy.
Again?
I will, with Emily Hughes. So yeah. So just time keeps going, and we're excited. Excited, and thank you very much for all of it. And please, say hello to everyone for me. So.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah. All right.
A standing ovation from many in the crowd of 17,000, showing their appreciation to Paul Wylie.
Paul Wylie.
Sandra, you don't often think of a figure skating program as being particularly moving, and I think the combination of the program and the music in this case was just that.
It's one of the greatest pieces of choreography I have ever seen. It had all the ingredients, the technical ingredients of footwork and jumps and spins and interesting patterns. But on the other hand, it had the most important ingredient, which is a strong point of view.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the scores for Paul Wylie. 9.9. 10. 10. 10.
His coach and choreographer, Mary Scotvold.
10. 10.
Well deserved. Just terrific.
49.9.